Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Running Real Estate Podcast. I'm Ryan Haley, and today I'm excited to talk to you and to talk to our guest here, who I think is going to bring extreme value to our listeners and the people who are watching this podcast. It's something that I've had to deal with here recently with the passing of my father, which made me start thinking about estates. It started making me think about trust. It started making me think about wills. And I wanted to bring somebody on here who has helped myself and my family personally, somebody we've known for a very long time since our kids were little, and somebody who I believe has great knowledge that can, like I said, assist our clients, which hopefully will become your clients at some point. But today, I'm excited to introduce you to Heather Konyar.
Hi, everybody.
Heather, thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you tell us the firm that you are a partner with, because I don't want to mess it up. And I know you're going through kind of a rebranding, but so you're an attorney locally here?
We are. So we are going through a rebranding. I am an attorney locally. I've been in this area for about 20 years. I hearkened from Pennsylvania. I went to law school at Villanova Law School. My first job out of law school was in Center City, doing civil rights litigation, and spent a few years there practicing, and then decided I had my now husband, who I was dating at the time, had committed to this area. He's 22 years on the Ocean City Beach Patrol, and had told me that he was committing to the area because of his commitment to the Beach Patrol. And so I moved down here, started practicing in Salisbury, and actually 20 years later, I'm at the same firm that I originally started with. I'm now a partner with that firm. That firm is Cockey, Brennan, and Maloney in Salisbury. We've rebranded recently, and we're trying to, we're CBM now. We're trying to be a little bit less of a mouthful. It's hard when you have all those attorneys' last names. And we're in Salisbury, but we practice, we say that we are a regional firm because we practice across the bridge. Down here we like to say across the bridge for everything that's not the lower eastern shore. We've got attorneys who are barred in Delaware. We aim to get some attorneys who are barred in Virginia. And of course, we actively practice in the 4 lower counties on the eastern shore: Dorchester, Worcester, Somerset, and Wycomico.
Got it. And the law firm covers every aspect of the law, from real estate to states, trusts, defense. Do you do a little bit of everything?
Absolutely. We do everything except bankruptcy, because bankruptcy is federal law, so we don't practice bankruptcy. But besides that, we are, a one-stop shop. You can find everything that you need. We've got 9 attorneys. We're growing very quickly. We're adding our 10th attorney in August, and we'll probably be adding more after that. But the good news is when you have that many attorneys, you can have attorneys who have specialties and can cover pretty much all aspects of the law. So I've been very fortunate in the fact that I started doing domestic law, divorces, child custody, child support, and then as other attorneys have come on and started building their practices in that same area, I've been able to divert and redirect my practice where I still work with families, but now I work with families at sort of a different evolutionary stage of the family. So I work with them in their estate planning. A lot of times now my clients are older. I have a lot of older, elderly clients. And it's called elder law. I do guardianships too. There's a lot of components that comes with doing estate planning. Mm-hmm. I do a little bit of real estate. I do a little bit of business and corporate work, because if my clients have businesses, some of their assets that they've accumulated are business interests, well, then you need to be able to coincide the business planning or the business succession planning along with the estate planning. And so I've been fortunate because in my earlier years of practicing, what I learned about families is that families are messy, right? We get together, we marry, we get divorced, we have children from first marriages, children from second marriages, we have children that we have adopted. We have family members that we are estranged from. Families are messy. This is the fact of life. And I learned that in my domestic practice. And so it's actually been a really nice dovetail into my estate planning practice, because now the families come to me and they say, regularly if people say, well, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but, and I feel like I've seen it all before. Don't be embarrassed. We can plan around it. I understand how families are. I understand that they're messy, that they can be fractured. I understand that your family and who you view as your family can be people who aren't even biologically related to you. And so because I have that experience and that knowledge, I think that it really helps me in the service that I provide to my clients, because you come to me with your facts and I'm not going to judge you. I simply want to know what your goals are, and then we'll figure out how we can get you to those goals. So it's been really nice that I've had that opportunity to do the family law first before I moved into the estate planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're speaking here, obviously my wheels are spinning a little bit, and I've come to you with our most personal things and trusted you, and you've done such a fantastic job of, like you said, not judging in any way and helping, trying to figure out what the goals are, which I think is huge. Even when we think about like wills and where this all starts, so the will and the transition to the estate piece, it's all stuff you've helped us with, and I still need more help, lots of help. But when I think about our clients, and some of them live here locally and in need, like you said, they could be going through the divorce. They could be having some of that domestic things going on. Some of my clients do not live here locally. They're buying a second home, and we get to know them, and they typically come to us. They write the contract, they get the financing, they put it into a certain name, but then afterwards, after they've purchased this property, they start thinking about, well, what if something happens, to myself or a spouse? What do we do? How do we get this set up so we're protected? So if we do decide to sell it, we can minimize the tax aspects to it. We were talking kind of off camera here a few minutes ago, about some of the common reasons people come to you for real estate needs, and maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the first questions I'll ask is, where do you maintain your state of residency? So for people who have second homes here, that's a very important question. Because if you're a Maryland resident and you have your home here in Maryland, your second home, then that's fine. That is a little bit simpler planning. However, if you are not a Maryland resident and you do have a second home here, or for anyone who owns real estate in more than one state, you're going to need a little bit more sophisticated level of planning, because if something happened to you with no planning in place, you would have to open an estate in each and every state in which you own property.
Okay.
So let's say you were a Pennsylvania resident and you have a condo here in Maryland. Mm-hmm. You'd have to open, your normal estate would open in Pennsylvania because that's where your principal residence is. Likely that's where most of your assets are. That's where your family home is. But without planning, you would also have to open what's called a foreign estate in the state of Maryland, which is a whole nother layer of needing attorneys and courts and complications. Now, with the right planning, we could have moved the Maryland property into a trust beforehand, and then there would be no need to open that additional estate in this foreign estate in the state of Maryland. So that's something that's very important. Is when I first meet with people, I say, what is your state of residency? Mm-hmm. And I can only do planning for people who are Maryland residents. Okay. So if you're not a Maryland resident, I'll have to refer you out. But the other thing we say is, and where do you own your real estate? Because if you have real estate in more than one state, then we are going to need to do that little bit extra layer of planning. And then, of course, beyond that, there's many more than just that, many more factors to consider than just that. I try very hard to get people to give me an idea of their financial landscape in that first meeting. And that includes more than just your real estate or your residency. It includes other sorts of assets, products that maybe we don't even think about. Like, I need to know about your life insurance policies. I need to know about your pension plans, your IRAs. assets that you may have that have designated beneficiaries, which means they wouldn't necessarily travel through a probate estate, but still are part of this overall picture of what happens to your assets and who do they pass to upon your death. So very important right off the bat to get this full financial landscape. And then we take that picture and we apply that to what your goals are, and we figure out how we can get there. Another real estate question that people ask me commonly is they come in and they think that it's a great idea just to add someone to a deed, right? So let's say you have a mother who's older, your father's already passed away, and mom thinks that the easy thing to do is just to put her children or her child on the deed. That is very common. People come to me with that goal in mind oftentimes, but there's a lot more to that. There's a lot of layers we've got to peel back to decide if that really is the best case scenario for your particular family. Because we wouldn't want to trigger something such as some unintended capital gains consequences, which can happen when you simply just add someone's name to the deed without, we call it consideration, is when you get onto someone's deed without actually paying for that interest in the home. So what we would do then is we have to ask a lot of questions. When did mom, if it's mom who's putting her children on the deed, well, when did mom purchase that home? In what year and at what price? And do we want to lose the benefit? There's something called a step up in basis that you receive when something passes upon someone's death. When an item of property is transferred because of the death, you get a step up in basis, the tax basis for that property as of the date of that person's death, which if the person has held the property for a long time, that can be a significant step up in basis that we want to take advantage of. So we don't want to lose that by jumping the gun and prematurely putting a name on a deed when there could be a better way to do it. And so for that reason, I understand what your goal is, but let me ask a few questions. Let's peel back. Let's find some more facts. Perhaps you have an accountant or a CPA that I can bring into that conversation, and we can decide if that's the best thing for you and your family. And oftentimes, if perhaps that's not the best route, I can still get you to the goal that you've come to me. You're trying to avoid this, that, you're trying to make things simple. Most people come to me and say, I just want it to be easy for my kids. I want to have done the heavy lift ahead of time so that when something does happen to me, the act of my property transferring to my children is as easy and simple as can be. And I can help you with that at the same time not triggering any unintended tax consequences. So that would be for your listeners. I would just say it's not as simple as just adding someone to the deed.
Right.
There's a lot of questions that come along with that.
Right. So you talk about this stepped up basis piece. What document or what do most accountants from a capital gains standpoint, what do they want to see to justify that stepped up basis? Is that just like an assessment, tax assessment? Is it an appraisal? How do they determine the value of the property at time of death?
So how they determine the value of the property can be twofold. So when you open an estate, in the state of Maryland, the estate goes through the orphans court, which is, such a sad name.
Right.
But all these years later, they still call it the orphans court, and the orphans court is run by the department called the Register of Wills. So what the Register of Wills does is they take a look at all the property that's going to pass because of this person's death. So the Register of Wills is the court that administers probate property. Property that's in probate is property that is titled solely in the name of the deceased person.
Okay.
So in order to transfer the title, it has to go through this probate process. And at the beginning of the probate process, you have to file an inventory of the assets that are going through probate. And in that inventory, you have to justify the values that you are assigning to each piece of property. Justification that is acceptable through the Register of Wills would be an appraisal through a certified appraiser. who has the qualifications for that. But the Register of Wills will also accept the tax assessment through the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation. You just have to get a certified copy of that. So what we typically like to do for our clients is, because we find the tax assessment is typically lower than what the appraised value of a property is. Now, and that depends. That can vary over the years. If it's lower, in sometimes it has been higher at other times. In my practice back in 2000, right after everything happened in 2008, for a while there, the tax assessments were higher. Now they're typically lower than what the actual appraised value of a property is. And if you want to realize the full stepped up basis, you would get an appraisal, which in this area is going to cost you anywhere between $300 and $500, but it can be wonderful in terms of the extra value to the home that it can help you realize. And that appraisal just, you go out and purchase the appraisal, and then you file it with the Register of Wills, and then that would be the document that you would need going forward when you do sell the property and you want to use the stepped up basis in value. You would get the pleadings and the filings from the Register of Wills, and that's what would be used.
Right. And that's something that you can just help them through that whole process. Like if
Absolutely.
Like if it was me, myself, I just went through this in Pennsylvania, obviously a little bit different, but my father passed, and he was the last one, and we had to find a will, number one, which is a whole nother interesting thing in Pennsylvania, where you actually have to have the original will. I'm not sure if that's
same in Maryland.
Okay. Which we couldn't find right away, but it was a super simple will. Just said that my brother and I were getting everything 50-50. And we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know if we need an attorney, if we need an estate, opened up. And the answer there in Pennsylvania was if you had any real estate, you needed an estate. Mm-hmm. And there they seemed to use, like the woman who we were working with there just said, well, we use the tax assessment. But they at least guided us, towards that process. So that's the same services that you would handle here in Pennsylvania or in Maryland, correct?
Oh, absolutely. So when people come to me, for an estate, for probate, so not the planning part. This is the part where someone has passed. They are typically very actively grieving. Right. And so I say to them, look, I will take everything off your plate that I can. Let me handle the business of the estate. Let me handle all the P's and Q's, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. You grieve. You be with your family. Mm-hmm. You do what you need to do to get back on your feet. And I don't want you to have the pressure of the credit card companies or the bill collectors or the medical providers calling and wanting to know when the bills are going to be paid. I don't want you to have to deal with that. I will take all of that. I have a team of people at my office, and we take on all of that. We take care of contacting the credit card companies, contacting the medical providers to let them know that the person has passed. We will contact the life insurance companies and get them the death certificates and help with all of sort of the administrative work that comes along with losing someone that oftentimes when you're grieving is just too overwhelming. So we will handle all aspects of that.
That's great that you guys do that.
Yeah, that's what we like to do. Is I just want you to I want you to be able to just hand that piece to us, and we'll take it and run with it, and we'll reach out to you when we need to. And then, it also allows us to build a rapport with our clients. The average estate is not going to close for 6 to 9 months at the earliest. Mm-hmm. So sometimes there are some urgent matters that pop up, but for the most part, we have this great span of time that we can get all of these things done. And we'll take care of that. And then, we'll be there along with you on your journey as you work through your piece of what's happening. And then by the end, when we wrap things up, it's sort of a nice relief for everyone all around to have everything done. And, the Register of Wills asks for a lot of filings. There are inventories, there are accountings, there's different forms that need to be filled out. And a lot of times, people will come to me and say, well, I think, you've been very helpful, but I think I'm going to try and do this on my own. Mm-hmm. And very commonly they'll come back and they'll say, I've got this hearing, the orphans court's making me, I've done something wrong. I don't know what I did wrong. I've got this hearing. Now I've got to go to the court. Can you just come back in and clean it up? And that's what we do, is we come in and we clean it up and we handle it. And we've got good relationships with the local register of wills. And we do our best to be as supportive as we can every step in the process.
Yeah. No, it sounds fantastic. It sounds great. I mean, I from firsthand experience, obviously, that's not what we're getting. Where we are, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's that desperation piece, that in nowhere to turn type of feel. That one of the main reasons I wanted you on here was to help our listeners avoid that. And that's where I think the planning piece, it just is so key. That whenever, I almost feel like anytime you buy real estate or anytime you are, doing anything in life, you need to have a plan. And we didn't with my father's estate. So that's why I wanted to have this to bring attention to it and to get people in touch with you, so they wouldn't have to go through that. So the planning piece, you touched on it. You ask a series of questions, but I guess there's a lot of moving parts with that, depending on what they own, if they have a business. We were talking about that a few minutes ago, which I thought was fascinating. Off camera here, we're talking about businesses and setting up that whole piece of how do you structure it?
Yeah, so the planning piece is so critical. I mean, we can help you at any stage. We can help you if someone has passed and there's no planning in place. We can help you if someone has passed and perhaps the planning hasn't been effectuated correctly. But what my favorite part of helping people is when I've had the opportunity to work with the person who's now passed, and we've been able to together put the planning in place, and then I get to see it through. I get to see how it works, and I get to see that it reached the goals that my client had intended. So when you first come to me, as I had mentioned, we sort of do this financial assessment. I call it, I say to people, I need to have an idea of your financial landscape. And your financial landscape some people come to me and they're sheepish or embarrassed and they say, I really don't have anything. I don't even know why I'm here. I went to some workshop and they told me I need to put this in place. Or you can come to me and you can have a great amount of wealth. And frankly, you need the planning whether you're in one category or the other category, or whether you're anywhere in between. Because even for people who don't think that they have much, your planning is not just your will, it's also your advance directives. And advance directives are getting more and more important, especially as we live longer. Because advance directives are where you're still living, but you need assistance. You need assistance making decisions regarding your person, your medical care, or you need assistance with regard to your finances. So that can happen to anyone at any stage in life. So if you come to me and you're the young couple who has, maybe 2 very young children, but really you've got more debt than you do assets, you still need planning. Because number one, we're going to put those advance directives in place. So if something catastrophic should happen, if there's an accident that no one planned for, but you've survived the accident, but for a period of time you're unable to communicate decisions, you're unable to make, perhaps you're hospitalized. Who are we granting the authority to make decisions for you, to make decisions about your medical care, to have access to your medical information for HIPAA purposes? Who are we granting authority to make financial decisions for you, to access your online bank account, to make sure that your bills aren't bouncing during the time that you're in a rehab facility?
Right.
And you can need those at any time in life. You especially need them as I had mentioned, people are living longer. And with living longer comes issues of senility or competency, Alzheimer's, capacity issues, right? And so those advance directives allow people to step in and assist you without having to go to the court and get a guardian appointed, which can be a lengthy and expensive process. So I say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Pay a few $100s for some advance directives, and you're going to save your family thousands and thousands of dollars down the road. So that's the sort of my speech that I give people who say, well, I don't really have anything. I'm not sure why I'm here. Then turn to people who do have accumulated assets. You had mentioned having business interests. So here where I practice, Worcester County, Wycomico County, we're in an area that has a lot of sole proprietorship, a lot of family businesses. Yep. So many people come to me and they have this family business piece, and maybe that's where the bulk of their wealth is, their asset is in the family business component. So that's very important for me to know, because your planning has to coincide with the structure of your business, with your corporate, how you have your business set up, how you have your stock apportioned between its owners, if you have buy-sell agreements in place for your business. And so when you come to me and you've got that family business, well, part of looking at your financial landscape is I say, I need to see your corporate books. I need to see your business documents. I need to see how you have your ownership apportioned. So we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to see if we need to make any changes there to coincide with what your goals are for estate planning. Mm-hmm. And, you can see that very quickly. It may be that I realize there's a team of people that I need to consult with. So I might need to talk to your CPA, to your accountant. You may say to me, as I often hear, is corporate books. What are those? I've got nothing. So the first person I call then is the accountant to find out, how we're filing the taxes, what the ownership is. At least that's a way that we can recreate some lost corporate documents that way. And then maybe you've got a financial advisor that I need to bring into the loop, because maybe there are some life insurance policies, or with businesses, there can be key man life insurance policies, and I need to find out what the plan is there. And there's so many moving parts to a good estate plan that a conversation can quickly mushroom, but in a very positive way. Because at the end of the day, all these moving parts they're all like cogs in a wheel, right? And they're all moving, we want them all to move towards the same target. And so I find it to be very rewarding to work with families and the team of professionals that they've pulled together to make sure that we all are on the same page, and we all have different elections checked, or different boxes checked, to make sure that at the end of the day, if something happens or when something happens, the transition can be seamless. So with family businesses, that's a very important component of what we take a look at. So I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Oh my God, it's so awesome. No, I mean, it's so awesome because, and then also too, like, when do they come to you? Like, I think a lot of us think, all right, well, they probably think about this stuff a little bit after they got started. I mean, I think about how Christy and I started our company, and it starts with a dream. It starts with this entrepreneurship of type of attitude. And I remember I went online and it's like, how do I start an LLC? And how do I basically start the company? I drove it all up to Baltimore, filed it to get my LLC, and then I got a broker's license. But that was great. We could open the doors. We could sell some real estate. But beyond that, it probably screwed everything up, because we ran as a sole proprietor for years, and we didn't like consult with somebody like you to really put in the plan to ensure that we're protected, that we're growing the right way, that there's key employees that you bring into the mix. Or like on us, we ended up getting to a point where we bought a franchise, and then how does that come in? Your franchise agreement. I mean, as we're talking, this is probably good, because this is what I'd want to help our clients with, is if you're in this position, you need to talk to Heather. And the time to talk about it is probably as early as possible, so you get the right framework in place to be able to grow the business the right way. Because I get a little nervous now talking to you, because I'm thinking, man, we could have done this a little differently. What if we tweak this, or what do we need to do in the future to make sure we are safe? So I think this is fantastic. And what I'm hearing is if you're thinking about starting a business, or you're thinking about protecting your children with a will, protecting your assets as you grow, and then starting the business, it all probably needs to be done together. Kind of, it's like unison. Yes,
it should be coordinated together. But if it hasn't been, it's also not too late to fix it, right?
Right.
So many people come to me and they're in a panic, and I say, yeah, but you're here. The time when you are alive and living is the time for us to be able to fix up these hiccups, is to recreate. You can recreate business documents. It's all legal. As long as we do it correctly and with the right sort of business resolutions and documents in place, we can restructure, we can recreate documents that perhaps you had but you lost, or maybe never had from the beginning. We can put them in place. When you're here, it's easy. The problem is when you pass and then the family comes to me and there are no corporate documents, and that's when, and again, we can work through that too. But it's going to be a little bit harder to put that puzzle together without that key knowledgeable person alive to tell us what's happened or what the history was or why this decision was made or what bank account to go to. So the best thing to do is to start to talk to somebody now. And, people come to me all the time and say, I'm so embarrassed. In the beginning, I didn't, I was just a little sole proprietor. And then I got so busy with the growth of my business that I wasn't worried about the behind the scenes paperwork, right? But so now when I'm thinking about the business succession planning, now I've got children who are on the verge of being adults who I would love to bring into this business. Now is the time for us to sit down and make sure that all the paperwork is in place and to clean everything up, because then the succession can be seamless. And then we can talk about putting things in place. When you're a first generation business, you don't have to necessarily worry about things like prenuptial agreements or buy-sell agreements, which are restrictions on who can own your stock, who can own your business. But once we start talking about multi-generational, once we're in the second, the third, the fourth generation, we need to have those protections in place, because that's what's going to protect you and get you to the next generation. Because we hear all the time, small businesses it's very hard for them to live past that third generation. And oftentimes it's just because we haven't put all those, I tell people it's so silly, but you think about when you're bowling and you put the bumper bowling in, yep. There's protections so that when someone kind of goes a little sideways, we can have the right protections in place to keep everything on that track, to keep the business on track. And in the beginning, when you're new and you're growing, you don't need those. They're not as important as when you're starting to, actually grow and get older, and now you're thinking about your children and how you've created this wonderful nest egg for them, right, to help them support themselves, to be active and continue the dream that you've started. So now it's time for us to put those pieces in place. Yeah. And they can involve things such as you'd mentioned our key man insurance, which is a specific type of insurance for people who are in the business. That's an important thing. I don't sell these products, but I know I have people who can help get my clients these products. But there are things like key man insurance, life insurance specific to your business, to fund things like the loss of a main contributor to your business before we have somebody who's able to step into their place. There are other aspects of planning that can help in addition to just life insurance that we can put in place, and we can talk about, like long-term care insurance. I mean, a lot of people come to me and ask about long-term care insurance because that's why most people come when they want to they're talking about maybe have the little old mother who the husband has passed away, and she says, I just want to deed my home to my daughter. In the event I need long-term care, I don't want to lose this. I don't want our family to lose this asset.
Right,
so
right.
That's a conversation that we can have. And long-term care insurance can be something that's an option. It can be expensive. It cannot be expensive. I mean, there are different questions and there are different products out there that we can take a look at in terms of figuring out what is best for your particular family. If you've got the business, how we can get the business to go forward. So you can see how every family is different and every conversation I have is different, because it's just your facts are just a little bit different than the facts of the person I just sat down with beforehand.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think for myself that, I've got 4 kids, and the dream would be that, we can create something while we're alive that ended up becoming a good business, and then we could, pass it on to our kids, and it would continue on after generation. And I would think that a lot of this would resonate locally here. I mean, we have at the beach, in Wycomico County, we've got some businesses that have really stood the test of time, that have been here a long time. And we just had Bunk Man on last week, who has 3 books on the history of Ocean City. And we were talking about some of these families that have been here over 100 years, that have had businesses. And, there's multiple generations that this is passed on to. And then some where we've seen where there's been some splits, along the way,
yeah.
too. So I would think that, this information is just so key for that business owner, regardless of where you're at, in not thinking it's too late. They really need to reach out to you and try to figure out a way to keep it going if we can. I mean, that's the reason I get up every day is to try to get a better life for my kids than what I've got now. So pretty key information here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan, you had mentioned, circling back to this, how important the original will is.
Yeah.
And that is, I think people underestimate how important it is to know where the original version of your will is, because in so many other areas of the law and of business nowadays, originals aren't as important, right? Because we have these electronic filing. I'm sure you do DocuSign as a part of your business all the time. And in those areas of the law, of practice, of business, originals aren't as important. However, when it comes to a will, the original still is very, very important. And of course, that's because it's a document that can be so impactful on a family, on what happens with a family. And it is a document that there has historically been a lot of fraud. People will, look at celebrities that are in the news. We'll have competing versions of wills. We'll have wills where they say that it's not that person's signature, not the decedent's signature. I think that's what just happened with, I feel like that with Priscilla Presley, right? There was something. She is to be the beneficiary of one of Lisa Marie's trusts, but a recent amendment to the trust, they don't think that was Lisa Marie's signature. They think that it was someone else had effectuated that signature, and it makes a huge impact on Lisa Marie's estate plan. And so what's the easiest way for the experts to try and discern if it's an original signature or not? Well, they need that original document. They need to see the original document. They need to look at they can tell by the way the ink is applied to the paper if someone was just tracing a signature or if someone was actually writing their own signature. I mean, there's a whole body of science behind it, right? Which is people who are far more intelligent than I am, but they need that original document. And so for that reason, and because of the likelihood that, because there is more of a tendency for people to forge this type of a document than other types of documents across the country, they still want that original will. And so a question that people ask me all the time is, what do I do with it? Can I put it on file with the local register of wills? And the answer is yes. I believe it costs you $5 to take your original will to the local register of wills and to put it on file. You can also, if you have a safe deposit box or a fireproof safe, you can put it in your safe deposit box or your fireproof safe. Or a lot of attorneys' offices, myself being one of them, will offer to keep your will as a courtesy. At my office, we have a huge walk-in fireproof safe that we use that we can put people's original documents in. But no matter whether you leave it with your attorney, the register of wills, or you put it in your own safe deposit box, it is very important that you've safeguarded it, and you've got to let people know where it is. So I've got an estate right now where we can't find the original. And so that is delaying opening the estate because we're trying to track it down. So that's something you had mentioned that I did want to highlight. Is people don't often think about how important that original will is, more so than an original deed.
Right. You are 100% right. And I'll just tell the quick story. And this is not Maryland. This was PA. But in my father's passing, the first person I called to try to texted, because I didn't want to tie up all your time, but I was texting you like, what do we do? Because we don't have the original will. And in Pennsylvania, what they do there is, you have to have that original will. So we thought that he was well prepared and got the will done itself. Like he went through the steps to have the will done. My brother's attorney out in Pittsburgh helped him do that, and they kept a copy of it, but they sent the original back to my dad. And my dad just, he never took it. There was no safety deposit box. There was no fireproof safe, and he had a lot of documents, and we could never find it. We thought we had it, but it was a copy. And we had an original power of attorney. So we thought we were good to go ahead and open up the estate. And we called the attorney up there to open the estate. And then I went over to him like, I don't have the original. I looked this over last night. Could not verify. It was definitely not the original. And he's like, I'm sorry, we can't open this up. Is there any place you can think of, to try to track this down, to the point where we were going to have to open it what they called intestate, I guess, without a will. And we were like almost there. And what finally, my mother, who is still alive and parents are divorced, she was helping us to clean out the house, found the original will, and was able to get it over to the attorney so they could file it, whatever the opposite of intestate is, I guess, with a will. But we went to the point where we had this copy of it. We knew who the attorney was who created the will. They vouched for that. They had sent it to my father to get it signed, and he took it to a notary in Pennsylvania. The notary notarized it, and there was 2 witnesses, and they were going to be okay with it, except for the fact that nobody knew who the witnesses were. So it threw a whole curveball in before, and I kind of went back and forth here. But the ultimate result was we finally found the original will, thanks to my mom helping us to do that. And that was the only way we were able to open up the estate. Otherwise, we would have had to do it without a will. So I didn't know it was that important.
Yeah, it is very important. Now, there are ways to get around it if there are no objections. So if you only have a photocopy of the will, and there are no objections between any of the beneficiaries named in the will or people who would be beneficiaries if there was no will. So if it passed by intestacy, then it's okay. But I have been involved in cases where we couldn't find the original, and the will dispose of the property in a way that one of the beneficiaries objected to, and so they would not consent to using the photocopy. So that's the risk that you run by not protecting that original and helping people to know where that original is going to be. So what we do as just general practice is when you come in and you sign with us, whether you we the original or not, we also give you electronic copies. We email you copies of your documents. And we say, listen, whoever the operative people are in these documents, so who you've named as your executor in the directives, who you've named as your power of attorney or your medical power of attorney, just forward this email to them so they have at least a digital copy. They understand what their role is going to be. And in that email, you should probably let them know where the originals are. The originals are at my attorney's office, or the originals are in my safe deposit box. And then as another note is, when you keep the originals in the safe deposit box, make sure that people know where the keys are, because that's another issue that we have. Not something we can't get around, but does create another sort of layer of administrative chaos when suddenly we know there's a safe deposit box, but we don't know where the key is, and we're not exactly sure what bank it's with, and then we have to go on a bit of a wild goose chase while we hunt that information down.
Right.
All of which we can do. But there's just simple things that you can do and places that you can, information you can pass along to just make things so much easier for people.
Right. Because you're going through all that while you are grieving and you don't know what's going on. You're still in a little shock, shock
Absolutely.
and awe, and makes it more difficult to make good decisions and or to have the mindset to think about where everything might be. So avoid it at all costs. Plan ahead, have a plan in place and notify others of what that plan is. I think would have certainly helped myself and my brother as we were going through this. And hopefully, this information helps our clients. Any other things that come up that can be tricky that you would suggest that they do ahead of time?
So I talked about advanced directives a little earlier, but I really do want to return to that because advanced directives, I don't know the statistic, but there's some crazy statistic that if you live long enough, you will get dementia. Every single person will get dementia if they live long. There's some statistic out there. But because we are living longer, dementia in our aging parents is a reality that a lot of people are going to have to reckon with at one point or another. And if you want to be able to continue to provide assistance to your aging parents, you really do need to have those directives in place, because with the HIPAA laws nowadays, for example, I've had clients who've been taking their mom to the doctor for years and years and years, and all of a sudden they go to schedule mom's next doctor's visit, and the office says, you know what, we've got this new HIPAA practice in place. We can't even schedule the appointment without you getting some sort of an advance directive for mom on file here. And then they'll call me and we'll get the advance directive on file. But you don't want to have to run into that, when you're having an emergency situation. You want that to already be in place. Same thing with the power of attorney, what I call the financial power of attorney. You want to have those in place and have those people appointed well in advance of actually needing it. And it is a lot of power to give someone, especially a financial power of attorney, because your financial power of attorney with the right document can technically access your bank accounts, make decisions about the disposition of your assets. That's a lot of power. And so the typical advance directive that we do at our office does not become live, so to speak, or active until you actually have the disability and two of your physicians will state in writing that, yes, mom now does have Alzheimer's to a disabling degree, and she is going to need some help with her finances. And so only then does that document become operative. So I tell people, it's okay for us to put it in place now because the power doesn't actually become active until it's needed. And, let's hope that it's never needed. But in the event that it is, you don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to apply, let's say, for Medicaid benefits for mom so that mom can get into the proper assisted living facility. You need a facility that specializes in memory care, or something like that. But because there are no power of attorneys that are in place, now you've got to go to court and get a court-appointed guardianship so that you can apply for all these benefits on mom's behalf. Because number one, it's going to cause you delay. And number two, it's going to be expensive. Guardianships can cost thousands of dollars. And here's the thing. Guardianships can cause a lot of conflict in the family because if you've got multiple children, maybe you've got more than one child that thinks they should be appointed as the guardian. So now we have these contested guardianships which are being litigated in the courts, which could have been avoided if mom had simply, prior to having capacity issues, chosen who she wanted to be her power of attorney for that purpose. So what I tell people is, by you choosing the plan, you can save your family a lot of internal strife.
Right.
In themselves trying to determine, who they think is best. Rather, you should take control and you should choose for yourself who are those best people to act on your behalf. So that's one thing. I just feel like people need to understand the importance of advance directives. Absolutely. They're far more important than people think. And we're seeing them be used more and more every day. And as the baby boomers get older, I expect to see more and more of it.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here. I really thank you for coming on today to kind of give people, just a general overview as to some of the things they need to be thinking about, because I know it's going to help a number of people here. You mentioned financial. I think is that one of the concerns that people have, or one of the reasons why people do not take the proper planning, because they're concerned about the financial cost that they might have. To do this, to set up, like, even as simple as like a will, do people just not do it because they think it's going to cost too much to set up that will? And is that a misconception?
So. I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions is that you can just go to LegalZoom, or you can just go online and do a will. Because what is very important is to know that the laws vary significantly from state to state. So, for example, the state of Pennsylvania may only require 2 witnesses for a will to be valid, whereas in Maryland we need 3 witnesses for a will to be valid. Or some states have notary requirements, and other states don't. So I have a lot of people who come to me with a will that mom or dad did through LegalZoom. Mom or dad have now passed, and we send it over to Register of Wills, and Register of Wills won't accept it. And because it doesn't have one of those requirements, doesn't have the right number of witnesses, there's something missing. There are elements of wills that have to be present for a will to be a valid enforceable document, and those elements vary from state to state. And so I think it is critical that you speak to an attorney in the state in which you are a resident, and you use the attorney to draft your will. And frankly, a simple will, which a lot of people fall into the simple will category, it's only going to cost you a couple of $100, as opposed to the thousands and thousands of dollars that your family can lose by not having proper planning in place. Now, again, obviously, the more assets that you have, and the more complicated sort of your financial landscape is, then it's going to cost more money.
Right.
So if you are one of those family businesses that needs to have sort of the aspect of the business take a look at, if we need to firm up some of your corporate documents to help that funnel into your estate plan, that's going to cost you a little bit more money. But your typical will, like I said, it's going to cost you a couple of $100. And that is consistent. That's not just my office, what my office charges. I mean, that's consistent with any attorney in the area of what that's going to cost. And again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So it's well worth it for you to go through the exercise. Also, because part of the conversation is asking you questions of things maybe you haven't thought about. So.
Right.
If you come to me and we're just doing a simple will, and as part of our conversation, I ask if you've got life insurance in place, and then I say, oh, who's the designated beneficiary on that policy? A number of people who've had policies in place for years and years will say to me, I'm not sure. I think it's my husband, but let me check. And you'd be surprised at how many people come back to me and say, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because that life insurance policy was actually, I got that through my very first employer before I was married or had children. And actually my mother was named as the beneficiary on that. And my has been deceased for 20 years now. So that's a really common thing. Just the exercise of it is important, just to get you thinking about things and checking on things that you maybe hadn't. Another common thing that I've seen in my practice is life insurance policies that are older. They get bought and sold, just like I'm sure you're familiar with how mortgages get bought and sold. Okay. So the banks buy and sell these life insurance policies. And a few years ago, I will not name any names, but I had all in 1 year, I saw this happen several times in 1 year. And what had happened was an old life insurance name that's no longer out there got bought up by a bigger, much more recognizable name. But when they bought them out, something was lost in the documentation that was sent over from the now defunct life insurance company and the new big guy. None of the beneficiary designations traveled with those policies. Oh, wow. So while the policies were still in place, all the beneficiary designations had been lost. So if you hadn't called and found that out ahead of time, what happened when you passed was, and this is what my experience was, is the life insurance companies, when they lose your beneficiary designation, they will only pay to your estate. So I had a number of people that wouldn't even otherwise have had to open an estate that now had to open an estate just for purposes of receiving the life insurance money. And then the money went, instead of to a designated beneficiary, it went as directed in a will or intestacy, which perhaps was not what the person's intent was originally. So again, the exercise of sitting down with an attorney and speaking about all these various factors is well worth it. It's sort of just like it's sort of like some forced housekeeping. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. That resonates very well with me because, I mean, in real estate, it's very similar. At least the way we handle working with our clients and the way we practice is that, I could pick up the phone. They could say, well, how much is my house worth? How long is it going to, take to sell? And I would be doing a disservice to that client if I just spit out a number that I think it's worth this and it's going to sell in this much time without more information.
Right.
You need to know the whole picture. What are the goals? Who are the decision makers in this process? How fast do you want it sold? So I understand the question piece to it helps us as professionals give better advice and be able to really point them in the right direction as to what it's going to take. So I respect everything you're saying there with that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot, and I'm sorry. I know I feel like you asked me a direct question, and I answer it big, but that's because
you just said the misconceptions, and you hit it. You nailed it.
Yeah, there's just a lot out there. It's a worthwhile conversation, and I really feel it's one of the best things that you can do for your family is to have that plan in place so that when they're grieving, they can just follow the plan that you've already put in place. Yeah. And there doesn't have to be, sort of those panic moments. But another thing is that if you are someone who deviates from what is standard, so if you die without a will, intestacy applies. So that's the concept of there's statutes out there that say when you die without a will, there's sort of just standard ways that your wealth will pass. But if you're one of those people who don't fit into those standard categories, perhaps you have a child that you are estranged from, or perhaps you have a child who is so financially independent and successful that child doesn't need to be part of your estate plan. But because that deviates from what like the default is, then you're the person who more than anything needs to go in and get some planning put in place, because otherwise the default will apply to you. And that may not be what's best for you. No. Maybe you have a child that you have a person in your life who's like a child to you, but you've never formally gone through the adoption procedure. That's something that we actually do in part of our estate planning, because in Maryland you can adopt adult children. You can adopt someone no matter what their age. So sometimes as part of our planning, we do adoptions, which is fascinating, right? And perfectly legal, perfectly above board. And in Maryland, it's something that the judges are used to seeing. And it can be a way to honor and celebrate someone who's a very important part of your life, but in a way that that they will be treated as if they are your child for inheritance purposes. You won't pay in Maryland. Children don't have to pay inheritance taxes. Right. So let's say the neighbor from forever means so much to you, has helped take care of you later in life, and you want to avoid that tax, that neighbor who is not biologically related to you, you can go through an adoption process, and that would be a way to avoid it. And again, I mean, all allowed for in the law, and all things that until you start the conversation, maybe you don't even realize are available to you.
Right. It's amazing. Lot of moving parts, a lot to think about. And you are very skilled at what you do. And I thank you for coming on here and sharing with us just a little bit of it. So for any of our listeners who are possibly interested in something, like I said, that resonated with them today, that they heard from you, if they want to contact you or are thinking about trying to do some planning, what's the best way to do so?
So my office is in Salisbury. The name of the firm is Cocky, Brennan & Maloney. We're at 313 Lemon Hill Lane in Salisbury. Our phone number is 410-546-1750. But you can also always contact me by email. And my email address is my last name, so I'm going to spell it. It's a little unusual for this area. It's Konyar, spelled K-O-N as in Nancy, Y-A-R. So the email address is that last name, K-O-N-Y-A-R, at cbmlawfirm.com. And CBM Law Firm is all one word. So that's probably the easiest, quickest way is to email me, because unfortunately I have no boundaries and I always have my phone on me and I'm always checking my email. But you're also free to call the firm and you can leave a message or go from there. And we have a website, we're Cocky, Brennan, Maloney, and you can check out our website, although we're in the process of rebuilding that. So it's going to be under construction for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of growth there. You were telling me about some of your growth plans, which is pretty awesome.
Yes, we are growing right now. We're in the process of, we've just brought on a Delaware attorney, so we're going to have a Delaware component to our practice, which I may have mentioned. We're trying to get ourselves some office space here in the West Ocean City and the Berlin area. So we're hoping that happens in the next 6 months or so too, because a lot of people would like to be able to meet with their attorney. If you're in Worcester County, you don't necessarily want to have to drive to Salisbury to meet with your attorney. So right now we accommodate people by doing Teams meetings or Zooms meetings. But when you come in for that actual signing, we do need to have you physically in person in the Salisbury office. So our goal is in the next 3 to 6 months to have a Worcester County office so that you can do that here for the in-person meeting. But we are flexible and we work with people all the time. We work with people's time constraints. Sometimes people call and say, look, my husband and I are going on a cruise next week and I need something in place. And we will drop everything and help you get something in place. It's not ideal, but we'll do what we have to do to accommodate people. But we do what we can for people. And we've got enough people at the firm that we can usually accommodate all sorts of unusual requests.
Right. Well, that's that work ethic you were talking about. Since you got in the business, you've been with the same company for 20 years, which is fantastic. But you've worked hard through those 20 years and built a great business. You've got great knowledge, so thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, no, it's been great, Heather. Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners. If you guys like this information, please reach out to Heather. Also, share, subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time on the Running Real Estate Podcast. Thank you.